vts-heartrate is a plugin for VTube Studio. That means it is a standalone application that is able to interact with your live 2D model. Specifically, this plugin allows you to drive changes in your model with the beat of your heart. You can become flushed, trigger expressions or hotkeys, and even have your model breathe at a harder and faster rate as your heart spikes. It's a great way to enhance your Ring Fit stream or take your horror game stream to the next level. In this tutorial, we're going to go over how to connect to VTube Studio, how to feed heart rate data in, how to do cool things with that data, and finally, some advanced uses. Before we dive in, if you have any further questions, comments, concerns, feature requests, anything really, you can always reach me either via email, tom@skeletom.net, or on Twitter, @FomTaro, either a direct @ or DM is fine. I'll be more than happy to help. As one final note, almost every piece of this plugin has a handy blue question mark button in the top right. Clicking this will give you a long-form tooltip about that specific feature, so if you're ever stuck, not sure what to do, give it a click and see if that helps. Getting set up is relatively straightforward. First, we'll need to go to VTube Studio and confirm that it is able to accept plugins. We do that by going to Settings, and scrolling to this section here, the VTube Studio Plugin API. Make sure that it is on, and observe your port number. Once you've done this, and boot up the plugin, it should automatically attempt to connect on launch. However, if you ever need to manually connect, simply click the connection status indicator, and click Connect. You can also adjust your port number from here as well. Next, we give the plugin an estimated resting and maximum heart rate. Everyone is built differently, so these values are up to you to figure out. The plugin will use this range when doing its magic, so even if your resting heart rate runs much higher than average, your model will not be flushed and panting at rest. It's all relative to your normal. For ease of demonstration throughout the rest of this tutorial, let's use the values of 80 and 160 BPM. Now that we've provided an estimated heart range, let's go over how to actually connect your heart rate to the plugin with inputs. Inputs are the various means by which you can feed heart rate data into the plugin. Out of the box, vts-heartrate supports a bunch of different input methods, including Pulsoid and Hyperate, which are third-party apps for smart devices. Most people use one of these two apps as they are extremely reliable and convenient. That said, for more advanced users, the plugin also supports direct connection over USB using ANT+, a common protocol for workout equipment. Let's take a look at how to feed input from Pulsoid into the plugin. Assuming you've already made an account with the site, just select Pulsoid from the input dropdown, then click Login, which will open a single sign-on page in your browser. Once you authorize the plugin to read from your account, you'll be greeted with the world's most minimalist web page providing you a secret token. Copy that token and paste it in the box, and you're all set. The token should last forever, but you can always manually destroy it from your Pulsoid account if you ever need to. For the rest of this tutorial, however, I'm going to be using the test slider input, which will allow me to directly specify a dummy heart rate. With it, I can easily demonstrate some of the features in the next section, outputs. Outputs are the various mechanics by which the plugin can interact with your model, and they can be viewed, added, and removed from the Outputs tab. Simply click the giant plus icon to make a new output, and then select the type you had in mind. Let's start by making a ArtMesh color tint output. Live 2D models are made of image layers called art meshes, each of which is given a unique label. By providing the plugin with a list of art mesh labels, we can tell it to tint these art meshes any color we like. The plugin will then dynamically apply the color. The amount of tint will scale with your heart rate, with no tint at or below your resting heart rate, and full tint at or above your maximum heart rate. For a flashy example, let's use pure red as our example color. If you are unsure what your art meshes are named, the plugin provides a handy link to a website made by Hawkbar that lists the name of your art meshes and highlights them as you select them in the list. Future versions of this plugin may eventually allow you to select your art meshes directly in VTube Studio, once that feature is supported. However, in addition to exact matches, you can also use fuzzy matches. This means that terms like face, neck, head, mouth are very likely to actually catch art meshes that are on your model's head. So, with our art mesh names set and our color set, let's look at our example. With our resting heart rate of 80, an expected maximum of 160, when our heart rate reaches 120, we are exactly halfway through the range, so the art meshes will be tinted halfway between pure white and pure red. The triggering of expressions and or hotkeys is significantly more straightforward. Once you make a trigger output, all you need to do is select the expression or hotkey you desire, then enter a heart rate threshold at which will trigger. So for example, 120 will make our crying happen. We go to inputs, crank up our heart rate, and we suddenly cry and become very flushed. Revert it back down, and it resets. One of the more subtle effects you can add with this plugin is having your model's breathing scale in intensity alongside your heart rate. To accomplish this, we'll need to make use of the custom tracking parameters that this plugin calculates. So, how do we apply these parameters to our model? Unfortunately, unlike the earlier output modules, this step is not automatic. We need to go into our model settings in VTube Studio and manually set up the parameter to drive the desired aspect of our model's motion. Fortunately, this is not too difficult. Simply click on the gear, and then the person with the gear to get to your model's parameter configuration settings. From there, either find the entry for your breathing or make a new one. In this case, we'll be making a new one. So we scroll to the bottom, click the plus icon, set the desired output to drive to our breathing parameter, in this case called param breathing, and our input is one of the custom parameters, this one called vts-heartrate breath. Make sure that auto breathing is off, and you're all set. Now every time you boot up VTube Studio, your model's breathing will be driven by the vts-heartrate breath parameter. One thing to note is that you'll definitely want to make sure you turn auto breathing back on if you're not using the plugin, otherwise your model simply won't be breathing at all. Another cool thing to note is that this parameter is relative to the ranges that we specified at the very start of the tutorial, 80 and 160. This means that even if you have a naturally very high heart rate, your model will not be panting at rest. So, with the parameter configuration all set, let's look at these three output types in conjunction with each other. We'll go to our slider, crank up the heart rate gently. Notice that we begin to get flushed. At our threshold, our eyes begin to water, and our breathing begins to accelerate the higher and higher our heart rate goes. Now we begin to slow it back down. The face begins to unflush, the eyes no longer water, the breathing slows down, and we're back to normal. All in all, there are actually 15 custom parameters provided by the plugin. You can read all about them in depth in the corresponding tooltip in the Outputs tab right here. So, what are the other 14 used for? Well, that takes us to the next and final output type, Live 2D items. Several intrepid technical artists out there have actually begun to make Live 2D items for use with this plugin in mind. For example, Studio 7MC have several asset packs that feature animated props that are driven by this plugin. Fortunately, unlike your own model, these props come pre-configured and equipped with tracking out of the box. So all you need to do is get them, add them to your scene, 7MC, drag them in, and they are good to go. We can see, for example, this prop will increase with the heart rate. This concludes the standard use portion of this tutorial. There are a couple more advanced features that are in the plugin that I'm going to go over now, but for general purposes and general streaming, the things we've just covered are pretty much all you need to know. The next two things that I'm going to cover are profiles and this plugin's API, so if any of those interest you, stick along for a little bit longer. Profiles are essentially collections of these outputs bound to a specific model. A model can then have multiple profiles for different stream types. For example, you might want to go blue in the face for your horror games in your horror profile, while you instead flush red for Ring Fit in your exercise profile. To make a new profile for your current model, simply navigate to this Profiles tab, click the giant plus icon, and then give it a name. We'll do Horror. You can also load any existing profile for your currently loaded model from this tab as well. By default, every model gets an aptly named default profile, created the first time it is seen by the plugin. This profile is also the one that is loaded when the plugin starts. If you make additional profiles, you'll need to load them manually each time you want to use them from this tab. As we can see, with the new profile, we no longer have any outputs set, so we can make a brand new one. We'll do an art mesh, make ourselves go blue in the face as described, and apply this to face, head, neck, mouth, and we should be all set. We'll crank up the heart rate and see that we go blue. The final feature we'll be touching upon today is this plugin's own API. Much like how VTube Studio has an API that allows us to make plugins for it, this plugin in turn has its own API. That's right, you can make plugins for the plugin. This is a very technical concept that doesn't really translate visually, so I'll be brief. Essentially, the API means that the plugin exposes all of the color data and custom tracking parameters that we explored earlier via code. Therefore, if you use a non-VTube Studio VTubing platform such as Vroid, you can potentially write custom code to apply these effects to your own model, be it 2D or 3D. For a complete technical document on how to use the API, please consult the README, which is accessible from inside the plugin. Thus concludes the tutorial. I hope you found it helpful, but if there are still things you have questions about, feel free to reach out to me either via email or Twitter and I'd be happy to work with you. Additionally, if you ever find yourself using this plugin on a stream, please send me a clip. Nothing is more rewarding than seeing people enjoy your work. So, that'll do it for me today. Bonus era, good evening, and happy streaming!